I'm actually going to get this party started here. Welcome, everybody, to Career Night in the Arts. This is spectacular. Give me 1 second to pull up my notes here. All right. So we are, this night is sponsored by the Arts Council in partnership with the Career Center and the McMullen Museum at Boston College. The webinar is being recorded, just so you know. I am your host for tonight, Crystal Tiala, Chair of the Arts Council, working with students Angela Salisbury and Yifan Wang. Tonight's theme is Entertainment Creative Production, and is the first of a series of webinars this week, so please check out the rest of them as well on the Arts Council page. And the students, if you would be so kind, you can put the link in the chat for the Career Night in the Career Week in the Arts so that people can check it out later. Our format tonight is going to be to engage our panelists in some general questions to start until about 6:25. And then we're going to take your questions from the Q&A section. So if you have questions, put them in the Q&A box you'll find up below. Please post your questions anytime and we'll get to them in a little bit. At around 6:50, we're going to break out into our after party. And that's going to be separate Zoom links where we'll divide up our panelists and you can join either Zoom party one and just chat with our panelists one-on-one, talk about, you know, anything you want to there until about 7:30. Now to our great panelists. We were just talking about how wonderful everyone's work is. I'm so excited. We have a diverse set of people here who have various careers and have graduated at all different points in time. So it's a great wide swath of people to get to know. I'm going to do a very, very, very brief introduction because I know what you really want is to hear them talk. And their full bios can be found on our website. And also we will in the chat, if not now or later, we will include links to their websites, which you have to check out because their work is phenomenal. So tonight's guests include Mark Franklin, class of 2012. Mark is the principal photographer and assistant photo editor of Playbill. Any of you who've been to Broadway know Playbill. It's a monthly US magazine covering major entertainment and are the programs that you see on Broadway, among other places. Chris Meyer, class of 1991. Chris is the co-founder and CEO of Mudhouse Media. He's an Emmy-nominated and award-winning producer working with the comedic duo, the Farrelly Brothers. His films include such hits as There's Something About Mary, Me, Myself, and Irene, Shallow Hal, Fever Pitch, Hall Pass, The Three Stooges, Dumb and Dumber 2, and many, many more. Gregory Park, class of 97. Emmy Award winner Gregory Park founded P&R Studios in 2009 and has become one of the premier concept designers and illustration artists in entertainment today. And Katherine Riley, class of 2016. She's a freelance sports photographer and editor in the Boston area, working primarily in sports. Her clients include many sports teams and national magazines, including the Boston Red Sox. Welcome to all of you, to our esteemed alumni, and thank you so much for returning to Boston College to talk with our students. I'd like to start first with hearing about your career path from Boston College. And Chris, it's my understanding that you drove to LA with little money and no job. Can you tell us how you got started after graduation?
Who told you that?
I watched an interview on you. I got the skinny.
A little birdie told you. Yeah, well, I'm dating myself because I'm the elder statesman here, I think, or unstated. But in the early 90s, the job market wasn't very, very good. And I was going to go to law school. but I never knew you could make a living at trying to make movies. And I decided I'd poked around a little bit in Boston for about a year, and I PA'd, kind of got my feet wet a little bit, and slowly over the course of the year, try to figure out what the game was and where I wanted to go. And I just decided to pack it up. And I call it, when I talk to, aspiring filmmakers and folks doing it, and just, I call it the big move, the big move west. And we made the big move, and, luckily things worked out. I don't know how much,
That's cool. Yeah, that's the short version. I
don't want to take up everyone's time, so I don't know how much time we have. Yeah.
Gregory, we'll go to you next. What was your transition like?
Yeah, when I went to BC, I started as a pre-law sociology major. Then I braved the path of being one of those, at least at the time, I don't know what it's like now, the makeup, but one of the rare theater-only majors, as I concentrated on doing design work at BC. And after college, I immediately went to graduate school because I felt I needed to kind of hone my skills more specifically. So I ended up going to NYU, which was fantastic because I was returning back home as well. After 3 years of no sleep at NYU, because the program is incredibly rigorous, I ended up working mostly in film to start, a lot of independent movies, small budget independents that primarily shot in New York. And then I started moving over into the TV world, which I still continue today working with. And from there branched out into other things. I actually was more of a designer, a set designer, but I kind of moved away from that and got more into the concept design part because I just kind of really love sort of the artistry involved in that, and also to be able to deal and not to sound terrible in terms of like the process, but at that point you could kind of just go with your ideas. And then of course after that, then you have to sort of put them within budget constraints and whatnot. So that's kind of where I landed, and I've been working mostly now in television and live events.
Mark, I guess we'll go chronologically with graduation here.
Sure. I am Mark. I was in the class of 2012. I studied theater and English, and graduated and didn't really know what I wanted to do. I picked up photography along the way in college as well, and really focused on that. And my first early years outside of college, I stayed in Boston. And just tried to like chip away and figure out what it is that I wanted to do. I moved to New York when I was 25 and realized that I really just wanted to be a photographer, and I freelanced a whole bunch, and then ended up getting hired by Playbill magazine in 2017 in January. So I've been there for 3.5 years or so, working with a fellow Boston College alum, Nick Foster, actually. So I've been—
Network helps.
Yep, those connections help, that BC Alumni Network. But the short version is I got here by just kind of stumbling productively, like trying to figure it out and like make my own roadmap. And it took me to New York.
Nice. How about you, Katherine?
So I was a history major and art minor. I went to BC on a lacrosse scholarship initially, so I thought I was going to be a college lacrosse coach. That obviously is not the case. And about halfway through, I stopped playing, and I kind of needed, I guess, a new hobby, something to fill my time. And I kind of joined the yearbook on a whim, and picked up a art minor with a photo concentration, which was great. But post-grad, kind of like a lot of other people, I didn't really know what I wanted to do or the viable career options that didn't involve grad school, which I knew at the time I didn't want to do. So I worked in PR for about 6 months, which I hated. I definitely can't do a desk job. And I kind of, as like Mark said, stumbled productively into the Red Sox photo internship in the 2017 season. And that has just been huge in most things and kind of leading to all of my other career opportunities.
Great. So I'm going to open this one up to whoever wants to I'm curious, and some of you might have to think harder than others here. What was it about your BC experience that you took away and helped you shape your career? What do you remember about that, and what do you think was really helpful in where you are now?
I'll take this one to start because I've been thinking about that a lot lately, especially given like as a photographer during COVID, like
Yeah.
you're kind of like back to the drawing board and a little bit. And so I think the thing that I took from Boston College, especially as a theater student too, was this ability to just do. I feel like Boston College's theater department, but then also just as in general, like the focus is on educating like the full entire person. And so you leave, you may not be like, I am the most proficient at this one thing as a complete specialist, but you have this ability that you are malleable, you're flexible, you know how to be productive, you know how to think on your feet, and you know how to just make things happen. And so for me, I feel like when I say stumbling productively, I mean, I just knew that I had a good work ethic and I knew how to chip away at something. And I decided that I wanted to be able to keep learning and growing and figuring out by doing things. And sometimes that, like, I had a survival job. I worked for the Boston Children's Hospital, but then at the same time, I was also working in theater. I was taking headshots. I was doing all of these things to help keep growing, making more contacts in that process, and then also refining kind of what it is that I want to do. So yeah, I think overall, Boston College taught me how to just be like a person and that like went very far.
That's great. Anyone else want to tackle that?
Nope. I'll jump in. What did BC teach us? I think passion. You know, you need passion for what you do, right? Whether it's in school and getting through the school, 4 years of BC, but taking risks, not being afraid to take risks, which is not easy, right? A lot of people are risk averse, and especially in the arts and entertainment space, it's not an easy path. And I think BC, supports that and then gives you the tools to go out there and back to Mark's point is DIY and go out there and just start doing it. And that takes some guts.
What do you think was your biggest risk, Chris?
Ooh.
Since you mentioned that you had to take risks.
Well, back to the original one was probably moving. I always tell, especially if you're from the East Coast, moving to the West Coast.
Yeah.
You're moving 3,000 miles, from everything you know and love for an if, and as you grow, then you'll learn the game and you somewhat grow up and start to learn a little bit more about what it is to be a professional and this and that. But the initial one is, one of the biggest risks I ever took was just getting in my car and headed out to the West Coast, and at that time, back to networking, I think that's key to, and we don't teach that a lot. Maybe they do, you guys do now, but networking is key to anything, right? In almost any business. The more relationships you have, the more stones you turn over, the more opportunities you get, and that's what happened, thankfully, when I finally got out there and got a break.
And here we are networking right now. Now they'll know how whole slew of students get to know you.
That's
guys.
huge.
Great. It is huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Greg, I know you said you had to go to grad school. I'm curious to know, what did BC give you that helped you in grad school and beyond?
This is actually a really easy question for me, honestly,
Good.
It's the people.
Yeah.
The people that I collaborated with in the theater department was the thing I actually still treasure so much to this day. I'm actually still friends with a lot of them.
Yeah.
My Facebook is littered with, not that I really use Facebook that much, but it's littered with Boston College theater alumni who are doing all different things across the country, across the world, actually, too. I think when I first got to BC, I had a hard time figuring out not only what I wanted to do, but also what my kind of niche was, like what made me happy. And I decided, I don't think I was really serious in joining the theater. I think I was just sort of more like, I'm going to just try this out. It should be fun. And I got hooked on it. And it wasn't necessarily because, oh, I'm so excited about Shakespeare or Ibsen. It was because these people that were working together, it was just so much fun to be around these people. It really was. I mean, I spent, 24/7 with these people through my 4 years at BC. And it really, what it told me was, wow, this industry, maybe for the future, it can be like this as well. And it's cliched to say, but it's like it doesn't feel like a job, right? It feels like you're just hanging out with some really great people doing something great that makes other people feel great. And that's kind of where it led me to. And then when I went to BC, when I finished BC, I felt I needed a little more training, a little more specific training to design. Because as you know, in BC theater, everybody does everything, which I think is fantastic.
Mhm.
But to focus on design, I decided to go into a sort of like a conservatory program, if you would. And that's why I went to NYU for graduate school. But I would say that's the thing I treasure so much and was so important, not only to my career, but also to my personal development, was the people in the theater department.
Katherine, you seem to change your trajectory during your time here at BC. So I'm curious to know what you have to say about Boston College experience.
Yeah, so post sophomore year, I kind of felt lost. Like again, like didn't really know what my purpose was. What am I going to do with my life? All my roommates were seesaw people who, had their jobs lined up since pretty much day one of freshman year, going into accounting or iBanking or whatever it is. And I was lucky that I had a friend who was like, just join the yearbook photo staff. Like we get credentials for hockey and basketball and football games. I'm like, oh, that's fun being on the field or the sidelines. And then I also reached out to the art department and was like, hey, like, is it possible to get a minor like this late in the game? Because I was a junior when I was starting those classes. I'm like, yep, totally doable. And I was lucky that I had some really great professors in the art department who at the time, we definitely explored like, I guess, career avenues, but it wasn't something I knew I wanted to do, but they were always supportive and trying, oh, like, let me set you up with like so-and-so who works here or there, just talking to all these people. And BC doesn't have a journalism program or anything, which I sometimes like, I feel like left behind from my friends who went to like Photo J school. But at the same time, I was super lucky in the photo department. Granted, it was a lot of like darkroom stuff and like really traditional, but at the end of the day, like the things that we learned carry over in work I do every day. And it's simple, but a good crop, good exposure, good composition. I think things that you definitely don't need to go to a specific, photo school, photojournalism school. And obviously the BC education is like very well-rounded. I hated taking those math and science classes, but it kind of added to the experience as a whole. And I know for every reason that if photography doesn't work out or, robots start taking pictures instead of humans, I have a BC degree to fall back on, which I think is huge. So yeah.
I want to like jump in because what Katherine just said too, and what we all kind of have said throughout all of this. Katherine, you were talking about like how sometimes you feel at the beginning you felt like a little behind because you didn't get to go to specifically like photojournalism school. And I feel like all of us were saying like we felt a little lost at different points throughout our education and trying to figure out what we wanted to do, especially because we weren't in a track like CSOM or like a nursing student where there was a very linear track. And I feel like something that BC taught me to do was like really delve into those areas that you are curious in, and even if it is just a hobby, it can become something else, and kind of like igniting that passion and then following it through with that supplemental education, if it's grad school or even like getting coffee with somebody else to ask them about their career. And I feel one of the things that especially when I was a student, I'm very type A, I'm very neat and organized. And so I graduated, I was like, I must know everything that I want to do immediately so I can hit the ground running. And then by 25, I can be, who knows, like running a business, I don't know. And I feel like I wish I had known to like relieve some of that pressure a little bit and not just like enjoy myself, like go have fun, but really don't stress out over the lack of linear path and really delve into those passions in a really joyous way instead of like an accounting type of way. Like I need to like invest this many hours of this dream to get this result, you know?
Oh, I agree 100%.
Mentors seem to be a very important part of the path too. I'm wondering who your mentors, and I'm not saying just Boston College, but just in general, who were your mentors? I mean, who really helped show you, the way forward? Katherine mentioned a friend who really kind of changed her path, and art teachers, but other thoughts on pivotal people in your lives?
Yeah, I mean, I can like add to that. So I think Professor Muldowney is actually in this chat because she texted me making fun of one of my comments. Thank you, Greer. So she was huge for me while at BC and just kind of giving me the confidence to kind of pursue this, which I'm someone who I kind of need that extra push sometimes. And we're still in touch today. Hopefully we get truffle fries soon once the world is normal. And then outside of BC, I've been really lucky to have two people who have been huge for me. Billy Weiss, who is staff photographer with the Boston Red Sox, and then Maddie Meyer, who's a staff photographer with Getty Images. Especially Maddie, there aren't a lot of women on the sidelines at these sporting games, so she's just been huge in like getting my name out to people. And same with Billy, like if they can't do a job, they'll pass my name along or like always offer like portfolio feedback, and they're friends too, which I think is really important. Is obviously I look up to them, but it's not so much of a fear thing. Like, oh my God, they're so amazing. I can't like go to them with this problem. Like they're so open, so awesome. And I think it's really important to find a person or two like that, regardless of what career or industry you're in.
I'll join in on this conversation in terms of the mentor. My mentor was a guy named Peter Dean Beck. He's a opera designer, which was interesting because I don't work in opera at all. But I worked with him while I was in graduate school, and you think mentor, they're going to teach you skills. They're going to teach you how to be, in my industry, a better designer, a better painter, or something like that. He actually provided me with confidence that I could do this. It's very different being in an educational setting versus being in a professional world. You're dealing with a lot more different things, sort of this. Sometimes when you're in academia, there's like this idea of idealism. Like if I'm designing a play or a film, no one's going to edit anything, right? Because it's going to come out exactly how I want it. And he was really able to sort of not only engage my confidence, not that I was lacking that much, but I was more confident in my skills versus sort of my ability to interact in the process. And one other interesting thing about mentorship, we look at mentors and say, hey, mentors are great. You have to be very selective and you have to self-advocate to make sure that you get the right mentor. Because I won't say any names, I don't want to create any gossip, but I did have a mentor once, and a person I worked for, and was actually incredibly toxic. And I had to learn for myself that this was not the right path for me. I needed to disengage, even if it could create opportunity, because it was putting me in a place where I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. It was putting me in a place where, instead of what I talked about earlier about the collaborative process, it was just, defend and fight. And that's not why I got into the industry to begin with. So my advice in terms of mentorship is, they're going to do a lot of research on you. If a mentor is going to take you on, you should also do a lot of research on them and make sure that the match is a good match, and that, both mentee and mentor are have a good compatible relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When I think of mentorship, I didn't study photography in undergrad, so I didn't have necessarily like photography mentors, and I always had trouble like with this notion of like, how do I even find a mentor to begin with? And what I have found, and I still do it to this day, I'm extremely online, and the internet is the great equalizer. And so I have found some of the best mentors that I've had of my life and people that I look up to from just an Instagram DM. And I've gotten jobs that way, whether they're freelance. And I also do the same thing for younger photographers and people who want to be photo editors as well. I feel like there's like sometimes you just have to shoot your shot and send that email, and the worst thing that somebody can say is no, or they just don't respond. But the other thing too with that, and the way that I found some of my favorite mentors, is I just reached out not because I wanted to like get something specific from them. Like I wasn't like, I want to reach out to you so I can get a job. I just genuinely wanted to know about their career, and how they got to where they are. And most people, I feel like almost everybody on this group, but then also everybody also, just navigating the world, if you're just a genuine person, they'll, treat you just the same, and it becomes a two-way street, and it's a dynamic relationship. And so with that, if I go in with the specific question of just, how, who are you? How did you get to where you are? Most of the time they're going to say like, and who are you? How can I help you get ahead? And what do you want to do? How can I facilitate that? And so I think about that in terms of networking and mentorship, because you can always smell out somebody who is like being opportunistic when it comes to networking, and people just don't want it. Like I ignore those things as well. But yeah, I found all of my mentors from like an Instagram DM.
So I was breaking into LA that way. Did you find people to get you in?
Yes and no. And I think the mentor thing is, I think you should have mentors in your business and outside your business, almost, kind of like a life coach and then a business coach kind of thing, because it helps balance where you have your life questions, then you have your professional, and sometimes that cross pollinates. But, I mean, my mentors range from my mom, all the way to, some folks of note in business and in the entertainment business outside of it. And then back to Mark's point is, just be a human being with folks, and don't try not to go in and oversell and have an agenda, because, those folks get weeded out quick, and that authenticity, people can see right through if it isn't genuine, and just, for me, just be honest with people, and I'd love to, have some guidance and consult pending on what your availability and your time is, but I'm trying to think who else. I've had many, and I still continue to have many, and they kind of range from their different occupations.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these folks too, they just pop in when you're not even looking for anything, or some random person can give you some of the best advice that you may never see again, but obviously within your own space, the network thing's huge in mentoring. And I like it. I love it, especially with younger folks and even adults. I love talking to, because I love sharing my experience. And I think when I look back, back then I didn't really understand what networking was or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And I think it would have saved me about 3 years of my first, journey, of blood, sweat, and tears in Los Angeles, if I had done my homework before I went out there. Mm-hmm. And started calling. I tell everybody, like you guys are doing it now, and folks who are listening, networking's huge. And a lot of times when folks are going out there, I said, let me know before you come, because we can set up some meetings and interviews and things like that, but everyone wants to know when you're going to get here. So, one thing is just prepping and ahead of time, which, back then I didn't really know anything about that. So.
Angela, I'm going to hand it over to you now. I know you have some questions for the group.
Yeah, so we've been getting some questions in the chat. Tyler Allen wants to know what a typical day is like for you working remotely and pre-pandemic.
Who wants to jump?
I can start with that. So because I'm freelance, my schedule can be anything from like a week off with like no work, and it's kind of like la la land and just making sure everything's like in order, or it can be I'm working for a month straight, 12-hour days. It can be anything. So for example, if I'm shooting a Patriots game, right? If it's a 4 o'clock kickoff, like I don't get there at 4. I get there on like 12:30, prep, make sure everything's good. Talk with my remote editors on, we call it the desk. Make sure, send test images, get pregame stuff. If there's any like big, I guess, storylines, if there's a new player or someone's back from injury or a heated rivalry, and obviously, the game happens. And then because of COVID, we don't have editors on site anymore. So we're editing most of our own work, which is unusual for NFL games. So post game is a lot of photo editing and captioning and trying to get like the biggest stuff out as quick as possible so we can kind of beat our competitors, so to speak. So most football games I'm working for Getty, so we're trying to beat Associated Press, USA Today, and like any other wires that might be there. So a game might last like 3 hours, but it's more of like your basic 8 to 9 hour workday.
Katherine, can I ask you a question in terms of your profession? How are you dealing with COVID protocols?
So so I don't know how it's going to be when the Celtics and Bruins come back because those are indoor sports. But so far with Red Sox and Pats games, the Sox were a lot more strict in terms of where we could go. MLB limited it to 35 media members total for each game. So that includes writers, your TV cameramen, TV personalities, photographers. So it was a really limited group, much smaller than usual. And we only had 4 spots in the ballpark where we could photograph from, which was kind of counterproductive in terms of ways because some spots are better than others. And obviously we're in a mask the entire time outside. Does not matter if we're literally around no one else. And then with Gillette, it's kind of the entire lower bowl. We're kind of free to do whatever we want, which is really nice. And then for both places, we get our temperature checked. We felt like a work pass, which I don't really know if that does anything because you could very easily lie and say, yeah, I had no symptoms. But that's a requirement. And then this morning I actually had a COVID test for an upcoming assignment because they wanted that. So that happened.
There production work going on out in LA or anywhere that Gregory?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the toughest things for folks to do in Hollywood is for you to get them to read something, the script. And since everybody under COVID, it's everybody's reading now, and that's great. And animation took a forefront because it's a lot easier to do. You can write remotely, and the animation gets done remotely, and the voiceover gets done remotely. So there's been a lot of acquisitions in and around the animation space. It's just starting to surface. There's smaller commercials being shot, but most of if they are shooting, they're high profile folks. Adam McKay's shooting it. I forget the name of the title of a book in Boston. Every star is in it. It's about
Jennifer Lawrence is here.
Kate Blanchett in it, DiCaprio. I mean, a lot of the top 10 folks in the game are in it. Adam McKay is the director. It's all about. I think it's based in and around. What's her name? Elizabeth from Theranos. That whole.
Bad Blood.
Yeah, it's based on that. A lot of it's been pushed. A friend of mine had a really big movie that should have been in production as we speak and wrapping up just after Thanksgiving, early Christmas. That got pushed to pre-pro in January, pre-production, and they'll shoot that in the spring. And that was due to the theatrical release, which we're all affected by. If and when that's going to be, and no one knows. The theater owners and folks earlier in the summer didn't know where it's going and where it might be in a year from now. And obviously all the theater chains are, struggling. So things are getting back, not as quick, but they're starting to open up and things are being shot.
What kind of work are you doing, Gregory?
Right now, I'm doing mostly television because even though television has been affected, it's at least a medium that is sort of a little more resilient against the pandemic right now. Live events, sadly, are not doing so great, just to be blunt. And I'm talking about large scale too. I was working on the Olympics. The Olympics got postponed. I was working a gigantic project in Dubai, the Dubai Expo 2020, which of course now is the Dubai Expo 2021, because you just can't have a World's Fair type of event, with a global pandemic. It's interesting though, because it depends. I work a lot in the Middle East. I also work a lot in China. Besides the United States, also work in Canada. And what's interesting is sort of the attitudes on live events, depending on the culture of the country. I know Saudi Arabia is sort of kind of backing off a little on social restriction, and they're going ahead and moving on certain projects with still keeping in mind of social distancing, but not as rigorous as, say, the Olympics. And I'm working on a project, it's called NEOM. It's like the city of the future in Saudi Arabia, a gigantic project being sponsored by the Crown Prince himself. That one, we're moving ahead, and they just have a different philosophy of the way they're doing it there. But the large scale events are still moving. They're not moving at the frenetic pace that they normally would. I'm working on Beijing winter. It's definitely, there's something nice about it because you can kind of take your time to, create ideas versus sort of this, bang, 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 we got to get things out and approved. So it's a little different, but it's also still in limbo. We don't know how long the pandemic is going to last. We don't know if it's going to have a ripple effect for years to come. And, sadly, again, the live event industry has been hit so hard. Concerts, conventions, things like that. And even television, because there's so much in flux. And I think there's also much more of an acceptance to a Zoom background, versus a TV studio. You'll always have a need for those things. Like, if everybody's been watching the elections, I'm sure everybody's been watching it like nonstop. You still have needs for studios and things like that. But there's still a lot of uncertainty that's preventing the industry from returning to the way it was pre-pandemic. I would say that's kind of where we're at right now, but it is getting better. Slowly, but it is getting better, and hopefully it continues in that trajectory.
Are you doing lifestyle, Mark, now that theater's kind of dark?
Well, so the short answer is yes and no. So I always, throughout, even before the pandemic, still also freelanced. So I was focused on theater, entertainment, but then also portraits and lifestyle. Most of my freelance work did dry up as well, just because New York City, a lot of the people that I worked with are actors as well, and they have left. But so I've been focused mostly on my photo editor responsibilities. We went from being a team of 3 to being a team of 1. So I'm running the entirety of our photo department. And even though there aren't as many events, there are still plenty of large scale events. There are still events that are happening, and they might have one photographer, or they might, have, serviced them to the wire. So I'm trying to pull images and really still tell stories about the state of specifically theater, but then also the arts in general, while also being remote. So I've been doing a lot of that. I've been also doing a lot of pitching to other photographers and other shows and actors and stuff to create photo features. That's really kind of been what my bread and butter has been lately, which is using other photography and pre-existing artwork to continue making interesting photo features. And sometimes that's things like, look at this event that happened. Can you tell me what it was like as a Broadway person marching, protesting racial injustice? Can you also send me your photos? Other times that's reaching out to famous set designers and costume designers and saying, let's unpack the entirety of your career and talk about your process, doing things like that. And then, so that's kind of what has been on the work front. And then just also personally, I've been using this time as like some marinating time to try to get more skills in my toolbox. So I personally have been teaching myself more graphic design work, which is so hard, but I finally have the time to do it. I've been doing things like that. Also just brushing up since I didn't get to go to journalism school, just brushing up on a lot of my writing skills and copy editing and things like that. So when things do pick back up, I'm able to hit the ground running a little bit more productively than if I had just, sat in my bedroom in Harlem for the entirety of the pandemic, because we don't know when theater is coming back. So it's just trying to pivot and stay productive throughout all of it.
Ethan, I'm gonna send it your way. Why don't you pick another question to ask the team here?
The one on top is about it's skill or more networking related, but since everybody already touched on networking, I'm just wondering if you guys could talk about your perspective of networking. I did a little bit of homework on you guys, but like you guys, for Mark, I read you did a lot of like with client and all that, even with like just freelancer, and for Greg, you did a lot with big project, and Chris with the entire team as a producer, and Katherine was different press. So I'm just wondering if you guys could talk about your perspective of networking and from different scale and perspectives.
Yeah, I feel like if somebody reaches out to me in terms of like networking, I always just look for someone who is eager and just wants to learn more, because the point of networking isn't to say like, I'm the perfect person, I'm the perfect candidate, take me like on this job. That's what a job application is for. A lot of the time when I'm looking at when people are networking with me, and when I'm also networking, it's really understanding like, what do you want to learn, what do you want to grow, how flexible are you and willing are you to do jobs that aren't I get a lot of photographers who network with me, a lot of younger photographers, and I would definitely take them on the shoot if they're willing to hold a light reflector and make like organize, like keep track of my memory cards and things like that. And so that is clearly not glamorous work. That is not work that you will that will pay you millions of dollars, but it's somebody who's eager to learn and grow. And then also, I also over communicate when I do have somebody that I'm working with who is networking with me. And part of that is saying like, I don't have all the answers, like I'm only 30, like I don't know, and being able to have somebody who's going to have, like we said earlier, just who's going to be a real human being and have a conversation, be able to contribute ideas, but then also be able to listen. And also, I know that networking won't last forever. Like I see a lot of young photographers, I'll get them, like help them on their way in the industry. And then I'll look at them and I'll be like, when you are in like 2 years and I'm applying for a job, can you hire me? I always feel like I want to help push people forward because we're all in this together. Like it's there's new technologies, new things constantly happening. And so as long as that relationship is symbiotic and we're both learning from it, then I think that is like a successful networking partnership.
Continuing
Yeah,
on
kind
that.
of going off of that, most of the jobs that, sorry,
Oh, go ahead.
that
Go ahead.
I've either passed along to people or taken them on. What?
Go ahead.
The biggest thing is I can say is just being nice. Don't send me an Instagram DM being like, hey, can I come like shoot a Celtics game with you? Like, one, no. Two, I don't do the credentials. I'm just lucky to get one myself. And in terms of obviously it's a little different with me because I'm a freelancer. I don't really work for any specific company. So how I go about getting jobs is most of my colleagues, right? Like either they can't do it or, you know, it's like, I guess beneath them because they're, I guess, in that point in their career, but they'll be like, oh, like Katherine, she's nice, professional, work is decent, you know, and they'll give my name along. And then also working out, you'll meet people too on these jobs and be like, oh, like you do this, well, I can, you know, take you on to that, or I can pass your name along to someone. It might not mean a job, but at least your name is kind of like floating around, like, I guess, you know, it's like when it does come time, like, oh, we're looking for like a new so because, you know, they just happen to pass your name along. And like what Mark was saying, like, I never go into reaching out to someone being like, oh, like, can you get me a job? Because it just doesn't work that way. You know, just kind of be open to learning and doing the small things, like you said, like, you know, help setting up lights or little things like that. It goes a long way.
This is related to something Mark said earlier, what he was doing in the pandemic. It was sort of enhancing his own toolkit. Networking, you know, I think sometimes a lot of people think networking is about getting the right connections. Your skills is a big part of your networking. It's sort of that kind of, you know, adage of actions speak louder than words. People see your work. If you have a portfolio, whatever that may be, for you guys, you know, Mark and Katherine, it's your photos, your work. For me, it's, you know, my illustrations or my concept work. It's, if people see those things, people will find you if you're really good. You don't need to go to parties and be like, hey, here's my, you know, art, or here's my piece. People, if you have the talent, people will find you. They will reach out to you. It does help, obviously. That doesn't eliminate the component of networking with people. You have to do that. And I will say graduate school helped in a lot of ways. When I came out of graduate school, because NYU Tisch is one of the higher esteemed design schools, I got a lot of jobs without even showing any work. But that's not gonna last either, because eventually it's the body of your work that you build that kind of self-perpetuates your career. The fact that I have an NYU degree is only gonna last so long, because at some point no one's gonna care. Probably at this point in my career, no one cares that I went there. But I would stress that, and it's exactly what Mark said, and particularly in this time that we're living in with the pandemic, is to really hone your skills. If you are a photographer, go shoot stuff like you're on a job, and you're not going to get paid, but you have so much more to show later. For me, you know, if I have downtime, I'll just kind of make up a project and do an illustration of it. And that's something that's really valuable in this time, because let's be honest, there's not much opportunity right now because of the pandemic in terms of the arts and entertainment industry. And right now, the people who are working are the people at the top. And I don't want that to sound, you know, sort of pretentious or anything like that, but there's still work, but it's a limited amount of work. So if you don't have the body of and the skills to kind of compete with those people, it's going to be a rough go right now. So I think that is a key element of networking that one should do, is to build their body of work and to really refine it and really get it to a place where you have, a great amount of confidence showing it to somebody cold. I think that's something in terms of networking that really helps, not only in normal times, but especially in times like this.
I just want to add like an addendum to something that you said, Gregory, which is like the only people who are working are the people at the top. And I'm gonna like, the addendum is like the people who are working and getting paid like big bucks are the ones that are at the top. But like investing in yourself and your own skills and your own projects is work. It should be seen as work. You should go into it in the same way that you would for a job. The way that Greg was saying, like sometimes he'll make a project for himself. And I even think about like television production and podcasts or any creative medium. Like I think of that show Insecure, which started as a podcast. I think of it started as a web series. Broad City started as a web series. High Maintenance started as a web series. Like all of these things started off as passion projects that people fully still did the work, even though they weren't getting paid at it. And so while you do have this time to make to add skills to your toolkit, do it in a way that is constructive, rather than just, say, I'm gonna hit play on a YouTube video tutorial for 3 hours, unless you need to for self-care, which is totally fine. But then also just try to, work for yourself the same, like you are your own boss. So make your own projects.
And maybe also get outside the box. Stuff that you typically do in that passion project or something you've always wanted to do, that's a reach and a risk. You have the time to do it, go for it. If you want to shoot something else you've never thought about shooting that you've always been interested in, that's another thing. And the other, I learned from a friend years and years ago and he's in sales. And one of the, if I even just call and ask someone, hey, can you connect me with Mark Franklin? Yes. Okay. Why? Yep. I'll ask them, what can I do for you? They're not looking for anything, but I just like, that's a nice, just little gesture. If you need me, I'm here. And that goes a long way, even if they never need me again, but they'll always know that I'm there if they need something for whatever it is. So, the other thing is with the entertainment business we're in, I always tell folks, it's show business, right? So you can be on the creative side, you can be on the finance side, you can be in the studio side, and that's a big part. That word is a huge word, show business, because we're here to create and make things for folks, but it's also a business, so we have to keep that in mind. And that's you can straddle that networking side on both and try to become a little bit of a hybrid or whatnot.
I know we're approaching the time when we're supposed to hit those after parties, but I feel like one more question would be good. You guys up for one more question before we go to the next? So Angela, if you want to scan and pick one more, and then if people still have questions, they can join the next Zoom links there.
Great. I know we touched on this a little bit, but someone was wondering, for students or recent grads just starting out in the industry, where do you think the greatest need is right now?
Great question. With COVID, that's tough.
Yeah.
Once COVID's over, maybe.
The greatest need. Well, there's a lot of folks, from my standpoint anyways, in my opinion, but we're in the golden era of television, right? There's more TV being made now than ever before, and incredible projects. And even in my case, they haven't made a lot of comedies the last 5 years in the theaters, but there's a lot of opportunity and need. And that's thanks to streamers and a lot of other folks, that there's a lot of opportunity in television, if that's the route you want to go, to whether you're, and then that's another thing, back to your niche. You know, I always have folks, if you want to be into set design, find your favorite set designer or concept guy like Greg and go find the shows you love or movies and find the folks there that make those and go see if you can find a job with them. You know, and if you want to be a writer, you should start out as a writer's assistant in the room, director's assistant, producer's assistant. And that's, you know, just even if you're in your own hometown and there's production companies coming in, reach out to the, you know, sometimes a little difficult to find out where the office is and the office number and name and all that, but through your local film office, and they can point you in the right direction. But there's a lot of opportunity in television right now.
I'm not seeing a ton of need in theater because once again, it's shut down. But I can just talk about like what I see in photography in general. And I see a lot of need specifically on social media platforms, which is difficult because it's a lot of need, but then also there's a lot of people in it. But if you're able to work productively there, I mean, brands are constantly looking for someone to generate content. Like we are in the content consumption era. And so if people are able to present new ideas and make quality content, people will snatch you up. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll hire you full time. Sometimes you might be on contract. Sometimes you might be hired to shoot something for just one specific campaign. And I'm separating that I'm separating that from commercial work. But a lot of content to supplement the commercial work. So you're not going to be shooting their campaign, you know, Nike's campaign, but they might want to shoot something of like real people wearing their shoes, or they might, you know, shoot something specifically for those digital platforms. So I see a lot of need in that. Yeah, but Katherine could probably speak to it more as well as a photographer.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the whole like social media aspect thing. I know in my line of work, even with COVID, we're always looking for editors and like good editors. Good photo editors, whether it's remote or on site for these sporting events, are really, really hard to find. And it's not as fun or as glamorous as taking the photos, but it's also a great way to get your foot in the door. I'm part of the US Open team for tennis, and I'm an editor. I'm allowed to on my off hours to go and take photos that they're welcome to use, but I'm really there to edit. And that, while it's not, you know, taking photos of, you know, Rafa like winning and the big epic shot, it's still a great learning experience. I'm a huge proponent that it makes you better as a photographer, especially editing some of these other photographers' work who have, you know, had Sports Illustrated covers and things like that. You know, it's kind of like, oh, like this is what they're doing, or and also teaches you like what not to do. Like some people sometimes like, oh my God, like just no. And it's kind of up to you to like make it usable, because, you know, like social, they need content almost 24/7, especially with COVID. It's like they wanted more than usual. So we were pushing out so many photos this year. So if you, I guess, are interested in taking that career path, don't, you know, shut out the photo editing aspect. Because I've also gotten photo work from the woman who's hired me to edit, but, you know, other assignments have popped up where she's like, oh, we need a photographer for this in Boston, and they've hired me. So like, I definitely, you know, either teach yourself that or reach out to someone who's good at it and be like, hey, like, I see you're, you know, shooting a BC football game. Can I like edit your photos for you afterwards for fun and like have you give me feedback or something? I think that'd be a good idea.
Greg, do you want the last word before we jump to after parties?
Sure. In our specific niche, believe it or not, it's actually quite a small niche. There is actually quite a bit of lack of specific resources, and there's a lot of need for designers who have set design backgrounds or production design backgrounds who are proficient also at using technology, whether that's design software, 3D software, Photoshop, also, you know, social media. That's something that I'm actually always looking for people who can do that, you know, not at necessarily a highly proficient level, but someone who can provide support. That's I know the design schools are typically pushing computer proficiency. Uh, when I was there, there was this kind of weird push and pull of, do we do it in the traditional way versus the new approaching technology, where design software wasn't the greatest when I was still in school, but now it's leaps and bounds, as anyone can see from, just watch the Avengers. It's and not only is that great for my own industry, my niche, it's something that can be expanded out to a higher grade of niche. And maybe Chris can speak to this too, is I know VFX is huge right now. Like you were saying with animation, they're constant. From what I hear, I don't really work in film anymore, but from what I hear, VX is in high demand, and people can use that software and punch stuff out really fast.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for participating in this. It has been such a pleasure being here virtually with you, getting to know you a little better. We are still going to have an after party. So those of you out there who want to get to know these folks a little bit more and maybe let them see your face, there will be a new Zoom link. Now, the students, as it's my understanding, and Angela and Fan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you will be posting new Zoom links in the chat. All right, so what's going to happen is that you end this webinar, is that right, students? And then you click on the save the links. Before you go, save the links, click on that link and join the Zoom that will be next. All right, so in the chat, there should be, you should see your Zoom links, save them. Go to your Zoom link and you can chat. I'll be there shortly myself after everybody has done this. All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Crystal. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Yiffin.
Thank you.
Angela.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Peace.
See you guys later.
I'm here as well. You are there, still there. Okay. So